All right, so we are live. We are live here with Ashok Malhotra. Hello, everyone. I'll give them a minute to join in, for people to join in and start participating with us. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Ashok, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine. Good to be here. Hello, everyone. I don't know if there's, how many people are there, so I have no clue. That's
Well,
one of
rest
the things
assured.
about, the online thing. You really don't know who you're talking
Well, you can just be talking to me, and then that's good enough.
to. Okay.
Excellent. So, thank you everyone for joining us. And we have Ashok Malhotra here. He is one of our trainers here at Coach Arya, and he is an amazing coach trainer. And I'm also meeting him newly, if I'm going to be honest with you. This is the first time we are meeting face to face. So I am interested in learning about you. So I'm really curious to know about your background and how you got into coaching and how it led you to systemic coaching and EUM. So if you could just tell us about that.
Well, I had a very checkered educational background. After, various kinds of experimentations with engineering, philosophy, etc., I landed up at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I graduated from there, and after that, I was teaching at Administrative Staff College of India. I think my background has been a mix of academics and practice. As a practitioner, I worked in a few organizations in HR, OD, human resources space. UM came into being several years back. I think it came into being somewhere around, in a manner of speaking, in 74, when I came across the work of Claire Graves. And I had done some work, research based on that when I was in staff college. Then it remained in cold storage for a long time and got resurrected 20 years later. And I was not very satisfied with Graves' approach. And then I kind of, there is an inspiration from Graves, certainly. But then the entire thing of EUM or Existential Universe Mapper framework came. I didn't know the term systemic coaching at that time. But I realized soon that its assumptions and beliefs on which Jung stood were so close to what can broadly be called systemic coaching that I've got pulled towards it. And I think Ram's interest in systemic coaching has also helped. So, in a sense, it's helped me to see how Jung can be a very powerful way of engaging with systemic coaching. Answers your question, Neha?
Absolutely, absolutely does. So I'd be curious to know then if you can help me understand what exactly is systemic coaching.
And different people look at it differently. I can only tell you the way I look at it. The way I look at it is that, you know, individual and systemic issues are intertwined with each other. It's virtually impossible to say as to what belongs to the individual and what belongs to the system. So, if you are part of an authoritarian system, you are part of that authoritarian system because a lot of people agree to submit to it. But simultaneously, if you ask the people, they'll say, what choice do we have? It's an authoritarian system, so we have to submit to it. Or if you're a part of a corrupt system is corrupt because people in that are corrupt. But people will say, I'm corrupt because the system is corrupt. What choice do I have? So the issues of the individual and system are so intertwined that it's impossible to differentiate between the two. Look at it another way. Each one of us is part of multiple systems. You're part of a family, you're part of a work organization, you're part of society at large. You don't behave in the same way in each of these systems. And in these systems, not everyone behaves in exactly the same way. So people are different. and people are different across different systems. So to me, it makes a lot more sense to look at the interplay which takes place between the individual and the system. The individual impacts the system, and the individual is impacted by the system. Unless we recognize this reality. So, to me, systemic coaching is essentially an approach where you look at the individual's issues not in isolation, but in the context of the system to which this individual belongs, and how it is going to influence and shape the system as a whole. So the individual transformation has to be placed in the context of the system's needs. So that for this, and I'm not saying individual is subordinate to the system. I'm saying there is a interplay between the two. There are two entities, two living entities, the individual and the system, which are in constant interaction with each other. So my pull towards systemic coaching is essentially to look at this interplay between the individual and the system.
And the systems. So all the different systems to which they belong.
That's right.
That's great. And because, yeah, I do believe that, of course, we are a product of all the interactions that we have within all the systems that we are in. So I'm just really intrigued by this name, Existential Universe Mapper. So, can you tell me a little bit about what are its origins and where does that really cool name come from? Like, I'd love to hear about
I
that.
don't know whether it's cool because I've been under a lot of pressure from a lot of people to change this name.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah. Oh, well, people say, it's too abstract. It puts off people. People kind of think it's too philosophical or whatever, or too abstract or something like that. But I have resisted that. I'm glad someone finds it cool. But I'll tell you where it comes from. There are three basic terms in it. First is existential. The
Sure.
choice of the term existential comes from my deep resonance with what is broadly called existential psychology. Now, one of the main pillars of existential psychology is that it places a lot of emphasis on the subjective reality of the individual. You don't look at the individual as an object which can be put under the microscope and analyzed and interpreted and stuff like that. That the human being has volition, has a subjective reality, and the emphasis on that subjective reality is something which is part of it's one of the pillars of existential psychology. So that's one of the reasons the word mapper has been used because it's different from traditional psychometry. It does not measure. It does not say, I'm going to measure the individual along different traits, whether you are an introvert or whether you are an extrovert, and the degree to which you are an introvert, and the degree to which you are dominant or submissive or stuff like that. It tries to map, and we believe that the subjective reality of the individual can only be mapped. You can only, you can only, in a manner of speaking, take a photograph of it and say, look, these are how the different parts of the self. The term universe comes from the basic belief that none of us is just one person. There are multiple realities which are operating within each one of us. We call these universes. Whether it's when we look at the individual or the organization, we call these universes, or broadly what we also sometimes use the word human imperatives. That they are basic imperatives with which all human beings engage. But each human being engages with them in his or her own unique manner. So every human being seeks safety. Every human being wants to have a certain individuality. Every human being has certain aspirations, but how the mix happens, and that's what we use the word term universes, play out in an individual is something. That's why the term universe comes. So that's why it's called Existential Universe Mapper.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to put it. So I can see why you've been resisting the name, because it would be really hard to, encapsulate that into a short phrase of just three words, like it as it's presented right now. So I just want to get a little clarity on the term universe. So when you say universe, do you mean, like, for example, my interactions with my family, that's one universe, and then my interactions with work, that's one universe, or what do you exactly mean by that?
Well, one way of looking at it would be that at any given point in time, there are multiple forces. We have used the term universe. There are multiple forces which are operating in you. Right? There is a part of you which seeks a safe haven, a place where you can belong to, a group of people whom you can call your own. Now, it's not one single thing, it's a whole mixture of several things. That's why the word universe. There's a part of you which says, "You look, okay, all this belonging and all is one thing. I belong here, that's fine. But I'm somebody. I have my
Right.
needs, I have my desires, I have my individuality. I wish to assert myself." There's part of you which seeks a certain balance and order, where you know what is expected of you and what do others expect from you. There's part of you which is continuously wanting to transcend the limitations of your own context or your own situation, which is curious, which wants to know more, which wants to achieve more, which is not right. There's a part of you which also says that, look, all right, this is fine, but I'm part of a larger context. Where do I fit into the larger scheme of things?
Yeah.
So there are several universes. So what we mean by universes is a composite set of needs, desires, worldview, etc. And that's where the Graves influence comes. Graves used he used the word levels. We don't use the word levels. We use the word universes.
Okay.
Graves said that it is futile to look at an individual in terms of needs. These are the person's needs. These are the person's values. These are the person's, worldview. Every human being is a system, is a composite system, where many of these engage and interact with each other. That's why. So, what we mean by universe is a composite system of needs, desires, worldview, attitudes, values, behaviors, etc. And then
Yeah.
there are multiple such universes which are operating.
So there's like a confluence of all these beliefs and needs
That,
and ideas and stuff, and it's their interaction that
that's right.
manifests as
That's
what
right.
exactly is the
Yeah.
universe. Okay.
Another way of looking at it is that at any given point of time, there are multiple people who are operating within you. And
Yeah,
these
certainly.
multiple people sometimes are in sync with each other and create beautiful music. And sometimes they fight with each other and create havoc. So in you,
Absolutely.
you say, what is happening between these multiple people? So instead of calling them people, we call these universes, because these people are actually representatives of what we call these multiple universes.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. That's great. Okay. So the Existential Universe Mapper, the EUM, it sounds like it's a coaching tool that can be applied very beautifully to systemic coaching, right? And
Sorry, yeah,
go on, go on.
it's multiple things. Okay. Firstly, there are two main parts of it. There is Hume individual and there is Hume organization.
Organization, right.
So one tool, which is Hume individual, maps the individual's reality. Hume O, which is Hume organization, maps the organizational reality. The reason why it is particularly suitable for systemic coaching is because you have, it's a bifocal frame. You're looking at both the individual and the organization. You're not looking at, now there are plenty of frameworks to look at the individual. There are plenty of frameworks to look at the organization. But
Yeah.
Hume, to my mind, is the only framework which looks at both the individual and the organization simultaneously. And therefore, uh, in that sense, it has a great relevance. But it is also used for multiple other purposes. It is used for team development. It is used for organizational diagnosis. It is used for organizational transfer. Like you can use humor by itself and use it as an organizational diagnostic tool. You can use Zoom for recruitment. You can use Zoom. So it's a framework which can be used in multiple ways. One of those is coaching and systemic coaching. And in the context of systemic coaching, one of the, I think, distinguishing things about Hume is that it has a report called self-system report. Now, what
Self.
this self-system report, which actually doesn't look at you as an individual alone. It looks at what is the nature of your relationship with the system to which you belong. To my mind, it's the only report of its kind anywhere in the world. There isn't any other report. There are plenty of reports which look at the individual, but there are no reports which look at your relatedness with a particular system to which you belong.
Yes, that's fantastic, and that definitely sets EUM apart from other coaching methodologies and toolkits. What comes to my mind is that I guess the question that comes up for me is then how is it used once you have a map of the organization and the individual? How is it used in systemic coaching, or how is it applied, and how does that play out?
Okay, we'll talk about it a
It's a bit of
little
a big
more
question.
next week when I'd much rather have people like Ram and Susan talk about it. But by and large, it's used in, as I said, it can be used in a one-on-one setting. In a one-on-one setting, what you do is you ask the person to fill in both you, my, and your mo. So what you have with you is how this individual sees himself or herself, and how is this individual experiencing the system, and what are the implications of that. So it can be used on a one-on-one way. It can also be used in a group setting where you ask everyone to fill in their UMOs and UMIs. And you say, okay, now what is the collective picture which is imagined? And what is each person holding on behalf of the group? Now, one of the things which you will find in any group, that different people end up holding different things on behalf of the group. Someone takes on the responsibility of maintaining harmonious interfaces. Someone will take up the responsibility of looking at, new possibilities. So each person ends up taking a certain psychological role. So this helps in understanding what is the kind of but what also happens is that once we take that psychological role, we in a sense become captives of that role. And then everyone expects us to do that, you know.
Yeah,
And
that's true. It's like they
we
say,
automatically fall into it.
yeah,
So
right.
it helps at the group level, it helps that. At the organization, it helps in understanding what is happening with the total organization. What are some of the issues that the organization is facing? And how can there be a more meaningful, healthier interface, not just with the people who are working in the organization, but also with the larger context to which the organization belongs. How is this organization looking at the industry? How is it looking at its social impact? How is it looking at, so that's there are multiple ways in which it is used.
Understood. Okay. So suppose you're using the EUM methodology with with a client. There's one client and they want to work on perhaps their relationship with at their workplace, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so you would be filling out UMI and UMO through that person. Now, the idea I imagine is to effect some change within the individual as well as within the organization, right? But there's this parable, there's this assumption that people walk around with, or there is this phrase that everybody likes to say is that we cannot change others, we can only change ourselves. So I'm curious to know, how does facilitate that systemic and that organizational change, even if it's just through one individual, or like even if it's just through the coachee or the person
Well,
that
to
you're
begin
training.
with, Hume doesn't subscribe to that. The Hume's
Okay.
position is that uh, it is we don't always change only ourselves. We also change others, and others change us in any interaction. Like right now in our interaction, you are impacting me, and I'm impacting you.
Yes.
So this mutuality of impact is a reality. One of the fundamental departures which Hume makes is that it does not subscribe to the philosophy of an atomized individual, that the individual is an isolated atom, which has, that's actually the basic logic of systemic coaching. The systemic coaching premise is that there are all the time interactions taking place between, and so there is, of course, when you are working with the individual, you would focus on what is within the volition of the individual, sphere of volition of the individual. When you are working with the group, you would work with. So you do take into account the constraints and limitations of the context in which the individual, the group, or the organization is working. But you don't start with this premise that you actually say that, look, there are perhaps various ways in which you can impact. Have you considered that? Or have you only made yourself a recipient of what the system is giving to you? How can you impact the system?
Yeah. That's beautiful. That really sums up, I think, this. That's a great place to leave this conversation, and I think we can pick it up next week. I'd love for you to share with us what you're going to share with us next week. What are we going to talk about next week? How are we going to pick up
But
this conversation?
next week, actually, I'm not going to do much of the talking. I'm hoping Ram and Susan will do bulk of the talking because they are practicing. They are people who are, both of them are certified Jung professionals. They have used Jung. Ram has, Susan has also, she's teaches and she's planning to use it with her students. So I want them to share what their experience with Jung has been, how have they used it or intend to use it. I will also maybe talk a little bit about, it'll be more in terms of today we have talked more in very generic terms. I think next week we will perhaps be a little more specific in terms of what one may broadly call human action rather than human only. How does it pan out in action? So that's what we intend to do
Yeah,
next
like
week.
how it's applicable and what kind of problems it solves and things like that. That's great. I'm looking forward to that. That discussion will take place next Thursday on the 26th of August with Ram and Susan. And I also would like to mention that Ashok is not just an expert in EUM, but he's also a trainer with us at Coacharya, and he is going to be conducting a 30-hour EUM elective, which is starting on the 7th of September. It's pretty soon. So we are excited for that. And with that, I want to thank you everyone for joining us today. And we'll be back next Tuesday as well. We have a session on Tuesday too. So I will see you at the same time on Tuesday. And thank you so much, Ashok, for joining us and for sharing all your insights with us and with me. Like I've been so curious about EUM ever since I encountered it on, on our website, really just writing about it or putting up the course description. I was like, this sounds so interesting. And like, I just wanted to know more. So at least you satiated my curiosity, and I'm sure the curiosity of many other people out there. So thank you so much for taking the time out and being here. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Neha. It was lovely talking to you. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share
Absolutely.
some of my.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everyone. And good night, wherever you are. Good day, good morning. Have a great time. Take care.